Yeah. Graham, could you, for the benefit of people listening, just give a kind of short synopsis on what PTSD is? I know that we're coming to realize now it's not one single thing like we used to maybe think it was. It's very, very complex.
So I'll give my definition for sure. which the first thing I'll say is I call it post-traumatic stress. So I don't call it a disorder, because I don't believe it's a disorder. I believe it's a reaction. Yeah. And I believe it's a reaction from your nervous system. And the other thing I'll say is I'll never say that I suffered with PTSD. I'll say that I experienced PTSD, because the wording of I suffered means that it's then a disorder or it's a problem. But really, to me it's a reaction. And I'll try and qualify what I'm saying. I don't believe it's a psychological condition. I believe it's a physiological condition. So I explain it like this in my videos. I've made some videos to try and explain it, and where I've drawn upon my belief system is from Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, a leading authority on PTSD, and Professor Gordon Turnbull in the UK, who treated Terry Waite and John McCarthy back when that happened.
And just for the sake of people listening, they were taken hostage in the Middle East. They spent many years basically chained to a radiator. Yeah. And when they came back, they were helped by this gentleman to rehabilitate themselves into normal life.
And he's obviously a psychiatrist or psychologist. He's also ex-RAF, and he was mountain rescue, so he's had a bit of life experience as well. And he's considered a global authority on PTSD or PTS.
Can you get life experience in the RAF?
I'm not really sure. I suppose if you go mountain rescue, you might get a little bit.
I didn't know. I didn't think you guys left the camp.
Not often. Why would you? Why would you? And luckily enough,
I'm just playing the part.
Luckily enough, when I joined the Irish regiment, it was before the 5 miles of death, so I obviously survived, which is pretty good. I was very lucky there to miss that. So post-traumatic stress. I experienced it for many years, and then I learned how to deal with it. I then counseled many people, and I worked out through critical thinking some similarities. Now, the first thing is, if you catch the flu, which I'm trying not to catch at the moment, if you go to the doctor and the doctor will say, what symptoms do you have? And you say, sore throat, aching muscles, headache, sneezing, coughing. You'll have a selection of those, and he'll say, well, there's a flu going around. Here's your drugs. This is how we treat the flu. In my experience, what he doesn't say, what the doctor doesn't say is, how did you contract the flu? It doesn't say, did you kiss someone? Did someone sneeze on you? Did you shake hands? Have you been on an aeroplane with air conditioning? He just knows it's the bloody flu, and he gives you the treatment for it. So it's a physiological illness. Now, with post-traumatic stress, excuse me, from all my years of experience in counselling people with post-traumatic stress, it manifests in pretty much the same way. It doesn't matter whether you spent 5 years in war, 6 months in war, 3 tours of war, dropped grenades on people, saw people get killed, killed people, were raped as a child, bullied as a child, in a bad car accident, fell out of a tree, were held hostage. However you contract PTS, it manifests in pretty much the same way. Now, that alone tells me that it's a physiological condition, and therefore we must treat the physiological condition, which means we can remove the stigma from it.
Yeah.
Right? Instantly remove the stigma. that's easy for us to remove the stigma. Obviously, if you're a frontline policeman, or if you're still an active soldier, people still have a view of the stigma about it and think that it's a psychological condition and you're weak, so they won't come forward for help. And that's the awful sad thing about it, because it's, in my view, it's quite easily treated, and it's a very temporary condition. And again,
can I just say, and I won't keep interrupting, but
it's
that same bigoted view in the forces that prevent people seeking help for addiction.
Yes.
You know, we drink beer, it's fine. You know, we don't do that drug shit.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's like, they're all drugs, guys. Get over it. Beer is like the worst. Alcohol is, as a substance misuse specialist,
awful.
It's the worst drug.
The worst.
It destroys people, right?
Destroys families.
So having this attitude that, you know, if you have any kind of mental disorder, makes you weak, is that kind of same thing. It's these few bigoted people that prevent the majority from seeking help.
Yeah, and the military is a very ego-driven environment. So let's bring this back a little bit to the military, because that's what we're talking about and that's where we're from. So I tried to trace things back as to why the military people experience post-traumatic stress so much. Because the percentage of military people getting it was surprising more than say my ambulance buddies or police. And I've managed to trace some part of it back and map some of it. And this isn't all of it. There's tentacles. But one of the reasons is, Chris, and you know, talking to you, I've already worked out that, you know, why you joined the military as well. Two reasons we joined the military. One is, well, sorry, there's more than two, but two that pertain to post-traumatic stress is, one, we come from broken families, or we come from traumatic pasts and we don't have a family, so we go and join the military because the first human need is family or tribe. So Maslow's triangle and other platforms, frameworks, our first human need is to belong to a family. So we go and find a family, and that's the military, and then we give our allegiance to that family.
So Maslow, for people who are unfamiliar, Maslow was a sociologist. He came up with this theory that there's a triangle, and that for human, and if you think of the top of the triangle as actualization, which is what I've been saying, calling enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
So pure happiness. He's like saying there's a base of this triangle, or think of it as a pyramid. You need to build your base. So that's your basic needs, like food, fire, and water. Then you've got shelter. Then you've got human relationships. Then on top of that, you've got fulfillment. So and what he's saying, Maslow was saying, is you've got to fulfill those basic needs in order to work to a point in your life where you can ultimately become sort of happy. So a guy that hasn't got any food in his stomach or anywhere to sleep one night isn't particularly going to be worrying about reading about Karl Marx or self-help book or this kind of thing. But the guy that's got all that stuff in place is in a position to kind of, you know, cherry pick his life a bit. And what you're saying, Graham, is that for young people, we haven't even got that stable bottom part of the, you know, I mean, I'm a great example of that, because I was living in my car when I joined the Marines, you know, or certainly when I went down the recruiting office. I was homeless for the second time in my life. So I didn't even have a roof over my head. Well, unless you call a Renault 12 estate car a roof. So this is an indicator of, or a driver behind a lot of people joining up in the first place.
It is. So trauma drives people to join a family. Now, it's not just the military. Biker gangs are very, very similar, because they're the same type of family. You get your colours, your totem, your badge, your honours, your ranks. It's a very similar thing, and you'll find that it's full of the very similar people. And if you could harness bikers and put them in the military, you'll find they're very good soldiers. The second thing that I found, and this was through speaking to an ex-military psych here when I came to Australia first to sort myself out, was and is that a lot of the military are actually have an ADHD type brain makeup. And you certainly have, and I'll say that absolutely without fear of saying that. Whether you know it or not, I guarantee you have, just from talking to you for half an hour. And therefore,
could you just sum up what ADHD is then for people that might not be?
I'll do it in a nicer way, because ADHD is just, okay, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is what it says in the DSM. Okay?
Sorry, what were you saying?
Exactly. Squirrels. And people with that makeup, they're thrill seekers. Yeah. And they have to have something to do, and they love to be told what to do. So the military is full of these people. Now, I don't call it ADHD, I call it Da Vinci type makeup, and it's a genetic polymorphism of the gene DRD4, and 10% of society have this polymorphism, which is the thrill-seeking gene. And most of those people are incredibly successful people. Michael Jordan, Bill Gates, lots of these people, but also a lot of them who haven't recognized their brilliance, become big failures as well. So this was written about by a psychologist called Otto Ranks, who was a protege of Sigmund Freud. But his books never got noticed or recognized because they only applied to 10% of society. So he never really, although he's absolutely right. And what he called was, he labeled it the neurotic Da Vinci or the artistic Da Vinci, after Leonardo da Vinci, who was obviously ADHD. Right? He had so many projects on the go and was a genius and didn't finish most of them. So we joined the military, and it sort of goes to what you were saying earlier about people just wanting the action, and it's so glamorous for thrill seekers. Where else do you get that? There are other jobs, but the military is one of those main ones. So with childhood trauma, or if you like, complex post-traumatic stress, you then go into a war zone, or your ADHD, you then go into a war zone. We've already got a predisposition for post-traumatic stress. When we leave the military, we're leaving that family that we had. And you referred earlier to some ex-military people who don't get it. But you, Chris, you since you've left, you've done some other stuff, right? You've done some amazing things, and the military or the Marines doesn't define you. You define you. And I've done some amazing things, and this is where my argument about civilian bashing comes into it, because I've worked with better civilians than I have with some of my ex-military people. I've seen some rubbish ex-military people and some amazingly brave civilians who I've worked with, whether that's in aid work or whether that's in paramedics or even in Africa as a guide. So you can't just put this stupid military people are the best and civilians are idiots. And what that happens is that people, because the military is the best and only thing they've done, and then they get out and they go through something that I've labeled adjustment disorder, where they can't, and also civilian life is a lot harder than military life. In the military life, everything's done for you, right? Civilian life, you've got to have your own bank account, your own car, your own insurance. You've got to, no one else is going to look after you out there. You haven't got any mates around you. It's just not happening. You've got to do it. And so if they get out and they were a corporal or a sergeant, and then they had all the respect, and they had this forced lauding or respect in the military because you have to respect rank. And then they get out and become a carpenter, a truck driver, a whatever. They no longer do they have that respect. And that's a very hard thing to adjust to. And again, something quite interesting. I think quite a lot of times people, ex-military who have left, become depressed. It's just depression, clinical depression.
Yeah, can I just chip in here and say that the issues that these ex-military guys, so they've come from this very cosseted career where everything's done for you, right? We both know that.
Yeah.
You've also had this thing like when you're in military, you're up there, whether it's because you've got green berry or you know, a cherry berry, or you know, you're up there. You've been led to believe that civilians are shit, because that makes it easier to go and kill other people if you think you're superior, right? But you come out of the military and then things don't go well for you, so you're not this big fish in a little pond anymore.
Yeah,
you're a little fish in a very big pond.
Very big pond.
You've been taught that your best coping mechanism is alcohol.
Yeah.
All right. Things aren't straightforward in Civvy Street. Relationships are more complicated. You know, when you have a disagreement at work, for example, you can't just tell the person, "I'll see you outside," and have a punch up and then shake hands and it's done with. It's got to be done through these channels, all of which just seem so pathetically job's worth to you and tedious.
Yeah.
You have to work with people that don't have your value system.
Yeah.
Okay, they may have better values in different ways, but you know, in the military, you have a problem with someone, you go to their face and you tell them.
Yeah.
In civilian street, in your office, if someone's got a problem with you, what do? They go behind your back and they go and see your manager.
Yeah.
And then they come back and sit in the chair opposite you and start telling you about their packed lunch and what they watched on telly, as if they haven't just gone and grashed you up to the senior manager. Right. And then you go and get, you know, maybe a disciplinary action against you, and that is normal to them, right? Yeah. These are things that are hard for service people to accept, and as such, the alcohol becomes more the lack of self, the loss of anger, the loss of identity. Family relationships start to suffer because you're taking it out on the person who loves you the most, your partner and your children.
Yeah.
You're then it becomes a situation of, well, listen, honey, you're becoming too much for us. You need to go away and sort your stuff out because it's not fair on me and the children. So then you lose your family, right? I'm just giving different examples here. And this is where you'll go to your GP and say, you know, things aren't really going well. And for good, for bad, and for whatever, he might go, PTSD, right?
Yeah. Ex-military PTSD.
You know, now, he might be suggesting that what you saw in Iraq or Afghanistan or Northern Ireland is the cause of all this. Whereas what we've just explained, Graham, is no, there's a load of factors, you know. There's our damaged childhoods, which meant we weren't very well cookies in the first place. We didn't really have our house in order. We went to this massive indoctrination called the military before we even knew who we were, right?
Yeah.
We were then cosseted and looked after and told that we were the, you know, the big cheese, the elephant's bollocks, so to speak.
They removed your flight and freeze response in training.
And then we come out the other end of that brainwashing machine and that big up machine and realize, no, we're actually
no deprogramming whatsoever.
Yeah. We're like a rock star coming off stage. He's on stage, his head is this big.
Yeah.
The second he steps through that exit door, he goes, his head goes, he realizes I'm actually just Joe Bloggs, I'm just completely normal. Yeah. So what does he do? Hits the drugs, isn't it? To get that feeling back again. And this is what we're seeing with where you get this PTSD label. Is it's a whole raft of complex ingredients. And the problem with throwing this blanket term is then when you do get people suffering the stress of war, for example, Jason Fox from the TV program SAS Who Dares Wins, fellow Royal Marine of mine.
Yeah.
I met Jason actually, a very, very nice man.
Yeah.
The book he's written is just an exceptional, brave expose of what he went to when the stress of war, and he will openly say it wasn't to do with my childhood. I had a great childhood, right? He said it was just the stress of war and feeling you're invincible, and then getting to the fulcrum point where it starts to tip and realizing actually a lot of my mates are dead, I'm not invincible, and I'm actually a bit scared of this now, and I want to go home and be with my family. And he says at that moment he realized something wasn't right, and his career was never going to be the same again, right? So that for me really is PTSD for, you know. And you hear a lot of people go, oh, they used to call it shell shock. Well, it's like what Jason is describing is more what I would call shell shock. You know, this like real, your nerves have been frayed for so long. You've been on edge.
You've had too much cortisone and too much adrenaline pumping through your body for too long. And that's not a good... Adrenaline, cortisone is good if a tiger walks around the corner and you need to run away. But to have it for 6 months and then come home for 2 months and then go for another 6 months and another and another and another, eventually your nervous system is going to start defaulting, because we're only human. We're only a body and a system and a lump of plastic, and it can only take so much of those hormones, of those stress hormones, and then you're going to start getting ill.
This comes back about to what I'm saying about fitting in with the universal plan. Is war is extreme. You're out there in your box of your own. You're not a part of this beautiful thing called the universe, right? You're operating and putting your body at odds with your environment, and you can only do that like for so long.
There's a very strange irony, Chris, as well, where people become addicted to it. I think the Hurt Locker, the film The Hurt Locker, alludes to this. And I saw it when I was an aid worker in Bosnia, with not just aid workers who would go from one war zone to another, but the photographers and the reporters. They become addicted to this crazy life and war zones, and they follow them from one place to another, because when they go back, they just cannot fit in to normal people's problems,
and they don't get the buzz, you know.
No, so and it's just mundane and first world problems.
I'm conscious here that for anyone listening that think they might be experiencing any of the things we've talked about, what can people... The first thing I'd like to say is, whatever, I mean, I've been through lots of trauma in my life. I went through trauma as a child, as a very, very young, well, probably as a baby as well, if I was honest. I also went through the trauma of working for the Hong Kong Triads and suffering crystal meth psychosis. So I was mentally ill whilst working for the Hong Kong Triads. I was only a doorman. I mean, I was a doorman for them, if anyone's wondering what I did.
Alive.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. When I came back to the UK, I didn't know what was happening to me because nobody could explain it, Graham. The medical profession were very kind of limited in their knowledge. My biggest thing was actually depression. Having lived such an exciting time in Hong Kong, I had to come back to England, and there was nothing here. I hated it. I absolutely didn't want to be in England. I hated everything about it, the boringness of it, right? Yeah. Anyway, to say to people listening, if you are struggling like I did, do not give up hope. There is definitely light at the end of the tunnel. You just haven't found it yet.
The reason I'm writing my book, Chris, and I apologize to everybody. I apologize to myself for not getting it written quick enough. Life and work gets in the way. Is that I am writing my book. It's a very simple, and it's called the PTSD Survival Guide. It's a very simple guide to get yourself out that shit. And it is, and I believe it is quite easy and quite quick to do. Dion Jensen, a good friend of mine, ex-New Zealand military, ex-New Zealand police, and did a lot of time on the circuit. He wrote the first good news book about PTSD. Now that's free to download on Success for Soldiers, which he runs. So
I'll put that link in the comments.
So the first thing for anyone who's, because this is the crux of it, Chris, right? There's people, hopefully there's people out there who are listening. They're hitting the bottle. They're self-medicating. They're arguing. They may have split up. They're depressed. They have suicidal ideation. They don't want to talk. They don't know what's going on. They're having dreams, nightmares, night paralysis, night terrors. They don't know what's going on. Where do they go? Well, they come to the likes of us. They can go to Dion's website, Success for Soldiers, and download his book. And it speaks in military terminology. It's very simple.
Okay. So people listening, right? If you don't help yourselves, no one else is going to. Forget all this Facebook shit about, you know, call a mate if he's struck. Like, people don't do that. People are generally pretty shit, right? This is my experience.
Yeah. Right.
So please listen to what Graham's saying. I'll put a link for that book down below. If you don't read it, then it's your fucking problem, isn't it? You know?
Then you're going to stay where you are. If you don't read that book, you know, do what he says.
I'll put a link for my book. And in case you're wondering, authors these days, we don't make money off our books.
Don't make any money.
If you think this is a plug for,
pay to get them.
Yeah. I've paid to write my 4 books now has probably cost me about coming up for £200,000.
Yeah.
Because that's what I would have. It's taken 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. And
I have $10,000 to publish my book.
So this is not a book. This is not a book plug. You need to get over that.
Yeah.
I'll put a link for my book, 40 Nights, in the comments. You can read Eat Smoke first, but 40 Nights is how I got myself out of the shit, how I changed my thinking after my moment of epiphany. And how I then went on and achieved every single goal, and ultimately happiness, which is, you know, that's my crowning glory. Is I came from the worst to being I'm the happiest person I know. I don't meet people that just love life all the time. Even when I'm unhappy, you know, even when I'm like, sometimes you wake up depressed because I've been doing one of my extreme endurance events and it takes a lot out of you, right? Even when I'm depressed, I still know I'm like the happiest person in the world, which sounds an irony, but
okay, so it's an interesting story, and I might even give you an invite to write in my book. And my book is in 3 parts. It's based upon, you're an old fart like me, it's based upon our old AID Memoir field guide. Do you remember it? Right? Yeah. And you could just turn to any section. So my book is written in 3 sections. You can read it back to front, inside out, whichever way you can turn to the section that's affecting you. The first part is my story and how I experienced PTSD and got through it. The second part is my tools of each section: sleep, diet, the brain, depression, anxiety, etc., etc. And the third part is individual people's stories. So I may come to you and ask for 3 pages of A4 about how you contracted PTSD, what it looked like for you, when you noticed you had it, and what did you do to get out of it. But the people who have written in that book, I've got people who experienced, who did the march from Srebrenica and came to Australia and got raped. I've got paramedics who have done horrendous jobs, and that was the genesis of my book from my buddy in the UK, who forced me to do the press up challenge. And then his story resonated. And one of the things that I started to say was, if you have post-traumatic stress, don't be ashamed of it, wear it like a badge of honor. And that's the very, very first step, because you've earned it. You deserve it. So don't be ashamed of it. Relish in it. Don't take that too far. Okay. So the stories, I'll have about 10 of the stories that are from people who have been through, and Dion will be one of these, the people who have been there, idolized suicide, come through post-traumatic stress, come out the other side, and now happy people who no longer are affected by post-traumatic stress. Because I'm sick of people saying you can't get over it.
Yeah. Couple of things, two things I say. One is I never went to see it. I couldn't go and see doctors because they kept telling me I was ill, and I'm like, no, I'm just experiencing life. You know, I really reacted badly against being told. I mean,
that you have an illness or disorder. Yeah.
Well, it was the whole thing about like, I take drugs. Fucking get over it. That's how I want to live my life.
Yeah. At this stage.
And so off the back of that is like, I was never diagnosed with anything. I definitely had, was suffering the effects of some sort of trauma because like the depression I went.
Your quintessential complex post-traumatic stress and CPTSD is a lot more difficult to deal with or treat. And I would, I find it very hard to treat people or talk to people with CPTSD. It needs a lot of expert feelings.
Everything I've experienced is all as well a manifestation of that complex childhood trauma that we talked about as well.
Because you have to get to that. You have to find that anger and you have to dispel it or learn to live with it or deal with it. And one of the complex issues there is at whatever age you were traumatized, you will have an emotional reaction of that age about many things. And that's a very difficult thing to live with. It's a very difficult thing to treat. And it's a very difficult thing for other people to live with because there's a difference in emotional regulation.
I'm conscious of the time here, Graham, because I don't want, not everyone's got 3 hours to listen to a podcast. So
absolutely.
What I do want to wrap up now, and then I can't wait to speak to you again because I'd like to talk about the parachute course because that was bloody one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about your time in Sarajevo.
Yeah.
And maybe I can talk about my time working in Mozambique because I think there's a few parallels there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's wrap up this segment with, if you're a person, maybe you belong to one of these organizations, these voluntary organizations that cropped up that want to support struggling servicemen. How, what is your approach to somebody? So I'm a volunteer, right?
Yeah.
I care about veterans. You're struggling, Graham, right?
Yeah.
Off the bat, I can say, first, you're not trying to change people, right?
Yeah.
Because change comes from them.
Yeah.
Second, you're not dictating to them what they can and cannot do,
no.
Right? You tell me not to do drugs or not to drink alcohol. That's never going to happen until I make that decision.
You have to be realistic.
All that happens is you just go on the list of being another fucking pain in my ass that I wish would just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Right. And I know people wouldn't want to be that pain in the ass. Right. So there's that. You're not judging the person. You're judging the condition. If the house is a mess, it's not because they're lazy. It's because they're not well.
Yeah.
If you see them going to the pub again, that's not because, not because they've just ignored all your advice. It's because they're unwell, right? Yeah. So I would say unconditional love.
You have to be non-judgmental. Yeah, non-judgmental.
I'm always here for you. I'm not going to be happy, Graham, when I see you, sticking that needle in your arm, but I'm not judging you for doing it. So I'm here. I just want to see the day when you're back to your good old self again. That's the best thing I think someone ever said to me. They say, Chris, like, I don't know what to say because I don't understand any of this.
No.
But I don't, I just want to see you stop doing that. And I'm here, like, come and live in my house, eat my food. He even gave me his clothes, this guy. right? I'm not suggesting everyone does this, but this was his approach. He never told me ever what I shouldn't do until the right time came, and he gave me a little nudge and went,
Yeah.
"Why don't you go down the job centre today, Crit?" And I was like, "Yeah, why don't I? You know, why don't I? All right, yeah." And do you know what? That one guy, I've got him to thank for changing my life, you know, and me, of course, but him because he didn't judge me. So, what could you add to that, Graham, or have I sort of pretty much summed it up?
You'll hear a very similar story in one of my videos that a paramedic friend of mine's son put together as his art video course, which is called Battle Scars by Sam Colledge. I say the same thing about a friend who was non-judgmental. He stuck with me like a rock. He was always there. He offered me work. He was funny. He just would sit and have a beer with me. Just treat people normally. All right? Treat them normally and give them a break. Don't try and force them. Sit next to them. You don't have to question them. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to preach to them. You don't tell them they've got something wrong with them. Listen if they need to be listened to, listen to them. And in Dion's book, he calls it he calls that person a battle buddy. So one thing I recommend is, if you're going through, first of all, obviously you've got to open up to yourself. You've got to open up to someone else. Find that person. Could be a family member, a friend, could be a doctor, could be a professional, but have a battle buddy, someone who you can be honest to, and they can be honest back to you, and they can check in with you from time to time, because you will go through the shitstorm, as Dion calls it. And when you're in the shitstorm, you need a way to get out of it. The other things that you were talking about earlier, you know, injecting drugs, drink, they're symptoms. So let's find out what we can replace those with, and let's address the cause of those symptoms, which is the trauma from childhood, the complex PTSD, or that thing that you're angry with, and let's work out how to sit with that and befriend that, and not make it your enemy anymore, so that you don't have to escape reality.
Yeah.
And be open and honest and not ashamed, and realize that this is a physiological condition. So if you had the flu or kidney stones, you'd go to the doctors. Okay, I don't always advocate medication, but if that's one route, it could be a catalyst. It could be a way to assist. I don't know, but own it, accept it, and don't be ashamed of it. In fact, wear it like a badge of honor, as I say, and then remove the stigma, because it's a physiological reaction. Now, if you're a soldier and you have exactly the same symptoms as somebody who was abused as a child, what's that telling us? That we're all human, and it affects the brain, which is a physiological organ in our body, and it affects it the same way. If it affects it the same way, we can treat it the same way. And my book, and you can read Dion's way, and he's created a thing called the PTSD Solutions Community. So if you don't like me, you don't like my words, you can go and find somebody else. And there's a website, and there's lots of people who've lived experience, and we've all beaten it. So my approach is a holistic approach where we go for sleep, diet, exercise, meditation, holistic approaches. I can also replace supplements in the diet that are going to which we're going to mimic the effects of alcohol, so that we can start weaning off alcohol. I never ever advocate abstinence, because it's pointless. We've got to be realistic. If people smoke marijuana or dope or whatever you want to call it, don't have the hydroponically stuff that's got bloody steroids or whatever they put in it these days. Have natural stuff that's grown and actually has a balance of psychotic and CBD in it, antipsychotic and psychotic, because you can't just tell people to stop doing something. So it's a very simple holistic approach. It's not going to happen overnight like a magic bullet or a pill. It's a holistic approach, but you have to follow it. Once you start following these things and in small steps forward, there is a methodology you can follow. I followed it. It took me a long time, but I got there eventually. And I can let people know how to do that a lot quicker.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Graham, I'm going to stop you there because I do like you and I really do like what you're saying, and I can't wait to speak again. I'm just conscious of the time now. So can you just, if you just stay on the line, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay, mate.
As we said, friends, the links are going to be below. If there's anything we said, if you got a comment, something you want us to cover in our next talk, when I hope we're going to talk about some fun things as well, like throwing ourselves out of aeroplanes, which is just mental. Everybody should do that at least once in their life.
Have to.
I'm going to shush there. So Graham, thank you ever so much for joining us. As I said, stay on the line and look forward to speaking to you again.
Will do, Chris. Thanks for your time, buddy.
You're very welcome.
Cheers.
Cheers. Friend, thank you for watching my video. I'm the only person I know that has ticked every item off my bucket list, and I did so coming back from chronic addiction with no help from anybody. Now I want to pass those skills on to you, but I can't help you unless you help me and hit the subscribe button. So please do so, and let's go and smash this world together.